All right, let's speak now to Aziz Alghashian. He's a Saudi foreign policy analyst. He joins me now from the capital, Riyadh. Aziz, good to speak with you. The summit is important for a number of reasons, one of which is that Saudi Arabia essentially is presenting a platform or an opportunity for Ukraine to reach out to countries that have essentially remained neutral. I'm talking about countries like India, Brazil, and you also have the attendance of China. This is important.
No, it certainly is important. Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you very much for having me and good afternoon. It is indeed important, and I think it's important because it gives a platform for those states that have remained neutral to voice the reasons why they are neutral. I mean, the problem with what has happened from the outset of the Russian invasion was that there was a polarization of the world order. There was an us and them, and I think that didn't suit a lot of these middle players that have interests. Of course, some of them, were very. Some of them were more neutral than others, I would say. But the reality is that interests does play a role here, and what I think this particular meeting is an opportunity to voice and at least put forth a framework of principles that will encompass many people's interest in these states that claim to be neutral and have a pathway towards solving the situation. I don't think the situation is good for anybody. So that's what I think one of the outcomes of this. Why is this important, this summit in Jeddah?
Aziz, the absence of the Russians from this important summit from the very beginning perhaps was a sign that nothing major was going to come out. But the fact that the kingdom and Russia do share a special relationship, and I'm talking about them being sort of the top two oil producers, does the kingdom feel, as you put it, that it can sort of sway Russia, have influence on Russia in terms of coming to an agreement of the framework of these principles?
Well, this is a very good point. And I think what I think this will happen and what Saudi Arabia is trying to do and has done is depoliticize its relationship with Russia. The fact that, okay, it actually condemns the Russian invasion, but at the same time, Saudi Arabia does have its interests in maintaining oil prices, not for the sake of Russia, but for its sake, for the sake of its projects. So I think what is very interesting here is that it's going to illustrate this this balancing act, as I said or alluded to in the previous question, that a principle that will encompass these things. Now, just to answer the first part of your question, is that to what extent is this going to be a real serious or significant declaration of principles? I anticipate that this will be a reference point for future negotiations to continue. I don't anticipate this being the end product and something that sums up the positions of all these states. Rather, we have to look at this as a process going forward. And part of this process is going to Saudi Arabia. And basically, Saudi, why is it very interesting? I think it's because it's very emblematic of the positive neutrality that the foreign minister alluded to not too long ago. The fact that, okay, we don't like what is happening, but at the same time, we have to work on our interests too. So let's figure out a way to encompass our interests and move forward to addressing this issue. And that we have agency too. It's not just receiving a Western diktat from somewhere else to say, this is how you support Ukraine. It's either our way or you're with the Russians. This is what Saudi, I think, and other countries have rejected. So I think this is why it's very important to understand and contextualize this in an emerging global order.
Aziz, since you mentioned sort of going and coming to Saudi Arabia, let's widen the scope for a minute. The kingdom is increasingly at the junction of competing global interests. Is this how Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to position Saudi Arabia moving forward?
Yes, just to be very clear and blunt. I think firstly, I mean, he made a very clear philosophy of his foreign policy when he was asked not too long ago about what is your philosophy of Saudi foreign policy. And he said, well, Saudi first, Saudi interests. But this is the thing. I think Saudi Arabia now understands that Saudi first and Saudi interest doesn't mean Saudi alone. It means that Saudi is working with other groups. It means that Saudi is making sure that it is a haven for many people who want to do business. That, and the Saudi perception of the world order, or how it sees its interests, it sees its interest in a firstly stable region. We could see this with normalization with Iran, and secondly, a stable world order that could allow investment to flow. So Saudi does have this interest. This idea, by the way, that Saudi is very happy that the oil prices have gone up and gone down. This is very short term, and Saudis aren't thinking short term. They're thinking long term. They want to stabilize the oil markets in order to attract investments. And that's part of their diversification of their economy, which also means diversification of their strategy.
Okay. Aziz Alghashian, pleasure to talk to you this Sunday on TRT World. Thank you.